I recently finished watching part 3 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for the first time, and I have to say that I haven't had so much fun with an anime in a long time. So please grant me a couple of minutes of your time today so I can share with you my thoughts on it. The first thing that I would like to mention is that I think that bringing back Dio was one of the best ideas they could have come up with, because not only the fact that they bring him back, it's the way they bring him back. It made absolute sense within the story. And also because I always thought that they did him a little bit dirty in the first part, because one of the issues that I had in the first part is that I always thought that when Dio becomes this incredibly powerful vampire, basically, it doesn't really show so much in the first part, especially because probably the part where they did him the dirtiest one that they did to him was the first fight that he has with Jonathan in the mansion, in the Joestar mansion. Because not only he loses the fight against a Jonathan that doesn't have any training in Hammond whatsoever. But this time they bring him back, and this time it really feels like he's this incredibly menacing, powerful being. And not only that, they also added the cherry on top, let's say, in which he stole Jonathan's body. You know, he's basically his head stole Jonathan's body. It talks so much about the depraved and wretched nature of the character, you know. He stole Jonathan's body, and it's basically desecrating the origin of the Joestars. Was an incredible touch into defining, doing like a very specific deed that defines the villain in a big way. Another thing that I really liked about part 3 is how it tells the story of Dio. It's a really long build-up, but the build-up pays off so incredibly well. And I think one of the main reasons why it pays off so well, it's because of the same premise that I was talking about before. It really feels in part 3 that they did him justice in terms of the amount of power that he has, you know. He really feels powerful, especially the stand that he has. The world is absolutely OP, and I really liked about the character because he's the final boss. He's supposed to be like this super massively powerful character, you know what I mean? And this is the kind of power that I always wanted him to have. Now, speaking of the stands, I think that they are way more interesting and more cooler than the Hammond, because the Hammond to me felt a little bit one-dimensional in a sense, and stands have way more dimensions than Hammond does. Stands are to me like the manifestation of each individual fighting spirit, you know, the fighting spirit of each character. That by itself creates many different dimensions, because not every character, it's the same. And also I think that we also have, based on that premise, we have different kind of stance. You know, we have fighting stance, which probably the most fighting one that there is, at least among the Stardust Crusaders, let's say, is the Star Platinum. You know, it's all about offensive and fighting and whatnot. But we also have some utility kind of stance, which is the one that Joseph has. And something related to the storytelling in terms of the stance is that in one of the final episodes, it comes to light that the Star Platinum and the world are twin stands, which makes sense because Dio was stealing Jonathan's body. So in an essence, Dio was fighting with which was supposed to be the fighting spirit of Jonathan. The only thing that he stole the thing and used it on his own, because it was his body after all, like 90% of his body. And that has a correlation to, of course, a JoJo's stand being in the bloodline of the Joestars. And I think that even goes beyond that, because of course we have the theme of the successors of the Joestars, right? Like Jonathan, Joseph, and now we have Jotaro. And the bloodline also has this double entendre with the whole vampire thematic that Dio has. And something else that also is related to the stands to a certain degree, but it's more related to Joseph in a specific, which was something that as I went along watching the anime, I was always asking myself, like, well, Joseph knows Hammond, and now he has a stand, so probably it will be really cool to see him using both, and he eventually does this in one of the ending episodes. Now, there was something that I was concerned about along the story, which was related to the stand users, because at the beginning it seems that all of them are just mercenaries, like guns for hire. They don't have any sort of allegiance or belief in Dio's cause. But of course, that changes drastically as we go further into the story. The build-up towards Dio, it's very much ingrained in this sort of deification, if you will. I don't know if that word exists or not. But it also has this parallelism with where the final battle happens. It happens in Egypt. There's this ingrained pharaoh sort of parallelism with Dio as well. So the fact that some characters actually believe in his cause and actually worship him goes along with that very same storytelling in terms of ancient Egyptian history, mythology and whatnot. Another thing that I really liked is that they keep making the Joestar successors more unique, more interesting, and different. However, they all share a common thread, which is the compassion. All share the same personality trait about the compassion. And this is something that even comes from, it traces back, I think, to even to Jonathan's father. But that compassion falls into Jonathan as a personality trait, also on Joseph and also on Jotaro, because even though Jotaro was more of a stoic, very stoic character, by the way, but it's more calculating. It's even better than Joseph with the mind games, I would say. When he defeated the enemies, he didn't actually had the want, let's say, of actually killing them. He only did that in scenarios in which the person would just wouldn't give up, or where it was actually necessary to terminate the stand user because it was too much of a threat, you know what I mean? But you know what? It's not only the Joestars that get more interesting. The companions get more interesting. They are more interesting, more intelligent, and actually do stuff. You know what I mean? Because if we trace back to part 1, we had Speedwagon, which maybe he was like the moral, ethical support or something like that. Something that Jonathan needed, a friend. Which is understandable, because you don't always need a character that is like your fighting partner, but more of a partner that supports you psychologically, you know what I mean? And I think that Speedwagon really fulfilled that role very well, but he was basically useless during the fights, let's be honest. And also we have Caesar, which honestly was a terrible companion, if you ask me, because at the beginning it seemed like he was going to be wise and has sort of a mentor role with Jonathan, but that was not the case at all. He actually went on a suicide mission in a very egotistical quest, let's say. And we also have Lisa, which was another character that I felt that was done dirty, because I actually thought that Lisa was way more powerful than they showed her to be. And it was a shame that she was, it was wasted potential with Lisa in terms of what I think she would have been able to do against the Pillar Men. But in contrast, you have Kakyoin, Polnareff, Avdol, and even Iggy, all very different from each other. The only one that almost goes, into a very stupid quest line, let's say, was Polnareff when he has to go to deal with the fake death of Avdol, right? He almost goes into a suicide mission. Now, I want to talk very specifically about Polnareff because I think Polnareff is king. Polnareff is probably the most crucial character in this part. And I know technically it's Jotaro, but hear me out. I always thought that the series needed more comedic relief because it was in the part 1 it was trying to be too serious. It was trying to be more dramatic, too dramatic. In part 2, we start to see the story actually detached from that very premise a little bit because Joseph finds himself in situations that are very funny, or he actually come up with ideas that are incredibly bizarre, or just funny out of the gate. Like for example, when he wanted to infiltrate the camp, the German camp in Mexico, I think it is, and he dresses as a woman. and he doesn't appear as a woman like at all. He gets caught immediately by the Germans. Well, one of them. The other one actually believes it, which is crazy. In part 2 is when it actually starts to understand the series starts to understand itself. However, I think that in part 3 with Polnareff in a specific is the character that actually is the catalyst for that to flourish and absolutely permeate the whole series. And if you ask me, even though I haven't seen the coming parts, of course, but I think that Polnareff is the quintessential, the crucial part of this puzzle, and through him, the series find character, personality, and aligns itself with what it truly is. Now, to finalize my commentary, I just would like to mention a couple of other things, okay? I would like to mention a couple of my favorite episodes, things that I would have liked to see, and finalize with things that I really didn't like about it. One of my favorite episodes was, of course, the final episode. Of course, it's broken in different episodes, but the final fight with Dio was absolutely incredible. The only complaint maybe that I have is that the final part, which is part 3, I think it should have been in part 1. Like the fight scenes should have been in part 2, because when you get to the third part, it feels like the fight ends too quickly within the length of the episode. So I think it would have been better to have that section of the fight in part 2. But maybe this is just like a little bit of nitpicking, because otherwise the fight was absolutely incredible. And there's something very specific about the episode all along, which is probably very unassuming for a lot of people, and it is that the dark setting of it takes place in Cairo at night, and the scenery of the city at night and the fight with Dio was just so, there was something very whimsical about it, but at the same time very ominous and gloomy, which is so much about it talks so much about the character of Dio, because Dio, of course, is the very dark character, a very ominous character. But he has this finesse, he's so what is the flamboyant? Maybe that it's the term. You know, he's just so out there. You know what I mean? And that scenery in the city actually complemented who he is in a very big way. Another episode that I really liked was the fight in between Iggy and Pet Shop. I think this is obviously the episode in which we finally see Iggy coming to terms and actually embracing, you know, the brotherhood of the Stardust Crusaders, actually becoming a part of them. Because otherwise he was just minding his own business, trying to not get into trouble and whatnot. The other episode that I would like to mention is the one where Polnareff becomes a baby, but with the mind of an adult, okay? That is a very important part to mention. This is probably the episode where he supposedly meets the love of his life, you know, this Indian, very attractive Indian lady. But the best part of the episode is that, you know, Polnareff is terrible with women. He's such a creep, you know what I mean? But he finally meets a woman that he likes, and he has to say goodbye because, you know, at the end he's absolutely 100% committed to fighting Dio. So it was a really cool scene and a really cool episode where you get to see a more vulnerable part of Polnareff outside of the crazy things that happens to him, and you see him actually committing to the cause. You know, that's why Polnareff is such an interesting character, because it surprises you with the decisions that he ultimately makes. Another episode that I really liked, which also has to do with Polnareff, is where he fights Justice, the old hag. And leaks the whole scene about the dirty toilet, mate. It was so incredibly hilarious. I was laughing my ass off at that. Polnareff moment, absolutely. And the final but not least important one, because probably this is one of the best episodes in the whole series, is the Bastards episode. And well, I think you know why that is. Now, let's talk about the things that I didn't like about the series, okay? I didn't like that they resurrected Joseph, okay? I know that probably this is going to get me in trouble, but hear me out. I think it was way better if Joseph died, like, in battle against the... I mean, technically he did, right? He did like a hero. He did die like a hero fighting against Dio. That's true. And then he gets resurrected. But I think him being resurrected takes away so much from that sacrifice. You know what I mean? I don't know if this was necessary towards building something towards the next part of the anime. Maybe that's the case. But contained to part 3, I think it was unnecessary. And I really didn't like that. Another thing that I didn't like about it was that we didn't get to see Joseph and Jotaro reunite with Holly at the end. We only see them in the airplane going towards, to reunite with Holly. But, I mean, that was the scene that I was looking forward the most in the final episode. Like, and you know why? Very much specifically because how the anime starts, and you see the relationship in between Jotaro and his mother, which is very distant, especially on Jotaro's side. Basically not at all on Holly's side. Holly is just basically trying to embrace him all the time and giving him love, but Jotaro is not having it. So at the beginning, Jotaro, it's like this character that you don't feel too good about, that you actually get to like him as the anime goes. It would have been a beautiful scene, to close the part 3, seeing Joseph and Jotaro coming back and embracing Holly that she's fine and whatnot, and you know, being this really happy ending, which we know it happens anyways, but it would have been better to have the scene. And imagine how incredibly powerful that a scene would have been if Joseph was not in the picture. Like, Jotaro gets home, sees his mother well, he relinquishes a little bit of that stoicism. Maybe he doesn't cry. I don't think he ever cries at all. But he relinquishes a little bit of the stoicism. He embraces his mother. Holly asks, "Where is Joseph?" And he tells the truth. And, you know, it's even more heavy on the feels. And one final thing that I really didn't like was that I think that some stands were a waste of potential. You know, they felt, some of them felt like a filler episode, but other ones felt like a wasted potential. And I'm thinking about one specific, which is the sun. Okay, that fight was, well, that wasn't even a fight. I think it was just a very ridiculous situation. However, I think that maybe the writers wanted that episode to be like that, like just some really pathetic stand, you know. And there's something that I would have liked to see that I really missed from part 2 of the series, is that I would have liked to see a historical based event or character in part 3. I really would have liked to see a character like Stroheim in part 3. And I couldn't help to think that this part 3 takes place in the 80s, okay? This is basically the end, the final leg of the Cold War, okay? We still have the Soviet Union. So if we had a German character during World War II, before World War II, in part 2, it would have been really cool to see a Soviet character in part 3. I always had this image in my mind where, you know, the Jotaro and the rest of the lads, you know, they travel around the world to get to Egypt. It would have been very cool to see, like, they arrive into Afghanistan or something like that during the Soviet Union invasion of Afghanistan, and they get, you know, maybe captured by the Soviet Union, and they have to escape a Soviet gulag or a Soviet prison or something like that, you know what I mean? And that there's a Soviet villain that is actually a stand user that is preventing them from escaping the prison or something like that. That would have been incredibly cool. But unfortunately, well, that was a missed opportunity, I think. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, check this other one that I have right here. If you would like to support my work further, you can check the support section in the description of this video, where you can find my Patreon and all the other links, alright? Thank you very much.